Coming up on Arirang News, South Korean President Moon Jae-in holds a virtual summit with representatives of the European Union, discussing both sides' response to COVID-19 and ways to boost ties. South Korea reports another 43 cases of the coronavirus, many at churches, prompting the authorities to warn of potential restrictions on gatherings. And retail sales in South Korea were up in May as the outbreak here slowed down, and thanks in part to the relief money provided by the government. Industrial production continues to slide, though, along with investment. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. President Moon Jae-in is holding a virtual summit this afternoon with top representatives of the European Union about ways to work together in responding to COVID-19. Also up for discussion will be pending bilateral issues and ways to further boost their ties, especially with this year marking the 10th anniversary of the two sides' strategic partnership. They'll also likely discuss the situation on the Korean peninsula. After the session, a joint statement will be adopted. They're meeting by video, but originally a face-to-face summit was scheduled for the first half of 2020 in Seoul. South Korea reported 43 new cases of COVID-19 on Tuesday. Of those, 23 were transmitted locally. 20 were imported, of which 13 were detected at quarantine checkpoints. 7 were in Seoul, 7 in Gyeonggi-do province, and 5 in the central city of Daejeon. Cases continue to be linked to gatherings at churches. Total cases now stand at exactly 12,800. There were no additional deaths, meaning the death toll remains at 282. Nearly 21,000 people are currently being tested. 6 months after the start of the COVID-19 outbreak, the World Health Organization announced on Monday it was sending a team to China to investigate the source of the virus. The WHO also warned the global pandemic is far from over. Making matters worse, in the U.S., the country's leading public health expert is suggesting a vaccine might not be fully effective in the United States. Lee Seung-jae reports.
It's been half a year since COVID-19 broke out in the Chinese city of Wuhan. With no sign of a slowdown in the number of new cases, the WHO chief on Monday said he was sending a team of experts to China to try and identify the source of the virus.
Knowing the source of the virus is very, very important. It's science, it's public health. We can fight the virus better when we know everything about the virus, including how it started. And we will be sending a team next week to China to prepare for that.
He also warned the worst is yet to come, adding that with the current environment and the condition the world is in, the WHO is bracing for the worst. However, the WHO chief said countries like South Korea have shown that the virus can be suppressed and controlled without a vaccine, and he called on other governments to be serious about measures such as contact tracing and for citizens to take responsibility for their own personal hygiene. Among the hardest-hit countries, the U.S. continues to see a sharp uptrend in the number of new COVID-19 cases, confirming tens of thousands of new infections each day. The total number of cases in the U.S. has now surpassed 2.6 million, with over 128,000 deaths. The country's leading public health expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, also warned on Monday that the U.S. is unlikely to achieve herd immunity to COVID-19 even with a vaccine. He added that a general anti-science, anti-authority, anti-vaccine feeling is likely to thwart any vaccination efforts. Recent polls in the U.S. show many Americans don't want to take a vaccine. A survey in May showed only half of Americans would get a vaccine if one becomes available, while a Washington Post survey revealed well over a quarter would likely refuse one. However, with over 10.3 million infections and 500,000 deaths worldwide, many of the hardest-hit countries like Brazil, Russia, and India are crying out for a vaccine. However, due to clinical trials, it's likely they'll have to wait until the end of 2020 at the earliest. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's retail sales edged up in May as the COVID-19 outbreak started to ease, and thanks to the government's direct relief payments to consumers. The outlook among businesses also improved slightly in June. Our Kim Jae-hee has this report.
South Korea's strong response to the COVID-19 pandemic, such as providing emergency disaster relief funds, led consumption in May to recover to levels seen before the COVID-19 outbreak. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday, retail sales jumped 4.6% on month in May.
Retail sales in May have gone up by 4.6% on month and by 1.7% on year. The figure saw an on-month rise for the second consecutive month, mainly due to the slowing down of the COVID-19 outbreak and rise in consumer spending, thanks to payouts of the emergency disaster relief funds and recovering domestic car sales.
But the same data also showed that South Korea's industrial output continued its downward trend, falling 1.2% on month in May. Facility investment was down 5.9% on month. But South Korea's business sentiment has improved in June, thanks to government policies and a slight recovery in exports. Data from the Bank of Korea showed on Tuesday that the business sentiment index for all industries in June was up 3 points on month to 56. By sector, the BSI among manufacturers was up 2 points to 51, and for non-manufacturers, it was up 4 points to 60. The BSI of export companies soared 6 points, the steepest rise since September 2017. The Economic Sentiment Index, which measures the economic outlook for both companies and households, was up 5.3 points on month to 63.1. But some experts say it's a bit early to be too optimistic as the figures still remain far below 100, meaning pessimists outnumber optimists. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
1 out of 3 companies in South Korea has adopted remote working since the COVID-19 pandemic began, and most workers seem to be happy with it. The Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry released a survey Tuesday that it conducted on 300 local companies, and it showed around 34% of businesses are currently allowing employees to work from home. That's 4 times more than before the pandemic hit. More than 70% of the workers are satisfied with the system, and more than half of the companies responded that work efficiency is almost the same as before. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you as always for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the U.S. is seeing a big rise in coronavirus cases, but still with some upbeat data, stocks were strongly higher on Wall Street. What's the story in the global markets?
Yes, as you said, U.S. market rebounded quite sharply yesterday. The Dow Jones was up 2.3%, S&P added 1.5%, and NASDAQ was up 1.2%. The concerns were related to positive test results, the new additional the pandemic numbers are rising at rapid pace. Clearly, the biggest rise is coming from U.S., and obviously that is a major negative. However, though, a lot of the numbers related to the economic numbers were coming in at better than expected. That has resulted into market rising faster, market rising back again. If you look at the sentiment related to the positive news is related to the home sales, and the home sales were up 44.3%, which is a record number. Clearly, there's a huge amount of liquidity injected into the system that is resulting into the relatively better numbers. If you look at savings ratios of U.S., it remains at 23%. And most likely that ratio should fall, resulting into additional boosting for the consumptions. So if that's the case, then definitely the market can rise further. However, though, Federal Reserve Chairman Powell said that the U.S. economy faces extraordinary uncertainties in regards to the containing the spread of COVID-19 and how that impacts the economy, which means that, though, not necessarily negative news, meaning that Fed as well as the U.S. government will continue to boost the economy through continuation of liquidity injection as well as the fiscal policies. So I think the market is depending on that rather than concern about the patient rising at rapid pace.
Right, well, Korean shares are higher today, too. The Kospi breaking through the 2130 mark. The Kosdaq up as well. What was driving that trade today?
Yes, from the U.S.'s positive news, also some news coming from Korea itself was positive. As mentioned earlier, the business survey index, BSI, came in at rising trend. It came in at 51 for June, rising from the 49 in May. And also the non-manufacturing companies' numbers were coming in at 59, rising quite significantly from 56 level. So definitely sentiment is improving. Also, the Chinese numbers are coming out, which definitely affects positively on Korean equity market. China's service growth rates were coming in at 4-month high. The numbers at 54.4. It's actually expansionary at this point. And also the manufacturing numbers were coming in much better than expected. It came in at 50.9. So it's once again expansionary versus previous month of 50.6. Market estimation was actually 50.4. So clearly numbers were coming in better. So if the Chinese economy is doing better, then obviously that has positive implication for Korean economy because Korea does have quite significant dependency on China related to the exports. And because of that, Korean Kospi was up about 0.7% for today, and Kosdaq was up 0.45%.
Well, now in May, because of the pandemic's impact on exports and so on, we've had a decline in production and investment, but consumption, it seems, has recovered. What trends do you see out there in the economy?
Right. Clearly, the Korea's dependency on the retail sales and consumption has grown quite significantly in the past several years. And in terms of dependency on export, also has still very significant part, but in terms of percentage-wise has declined. So if you look at the numbers, the negative numbers are coming from the industrial output numbers, which is contracting year-on-year of 9.6%. Also, the construction numbers were coming in and declining pace of 5.8% year-on-year decline. And these numbers are definitely showing a negative implications. But nevertheless, the retail sales of South Korea rebounded 1.7% year-on-year. Clearly, that is a positive implication because the consumption percentage of GDP well exceeds 65% of the total GDP. So clearly, that is a resilient numbers. With the continuation of government boosting measures, we think that the retail sales number remain to be quite reasonably okay, meaning that it will show year-on-year growth rate at least. The IMF have estimated that Korean economy will contract by more than 2% year-on-year, but that number is much less than the global economy as a whole. And hopefully, with the second half global economy recovering, resulting into higher export numbers, Korean numbers would probably be doing relatively better going into the future. In any case, right now, the higher dependency on consumption and retail sales is actually making positive implication for Korean economy.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, we'll have to leave it there for today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
China's biggest online travel agency for the first time in 3 years is going to sell package tours to South Korea in a one-time, one-off event tomorrow. The site Ctrip is going to sell them on a live show on Wednesday, broadcast on its own site and through WeChat. It organized the packages with the Korea Tourism Organization, which says this is proof of South Korea's effective response to COVID-19. China had banned the sale of group tours to South Korea in 2017, taking issue with Seoul's deployment of a U.S. missile defense system on the peninsula. That ban is still in place, though there's speculation this might be a sign it'll be lifted. The KTO pointed out that these are individual tours, not the banned group packages. The COVID-19 outbreak has led to an enormous amount of face masks being disposed of across the world, including here in South Korea. Experts warn they could damage the environment as they contain plastic. Lee Kyung-eun reports.
Hundreds of thousands of face masks are thrown away each day in South Korea, and some are just tossed on the street. At this park in central Seoul, cleaners are busy picking them up, especially after a weekend of crowds enjoying the summer sunshine.
Compared to the pre-COVID-19 period, I see more face masks thrown away.
The problem is these masks are made of synthetic resin, the basic raw material used to produce plastic. The filters, the key parts of the mask, are made by turning synthetic resins into thin threads. If these threads end up in rivers or the ocean, they can break down into even smaller particles of just 5 millimeters in diameter.
On a rainy day, these masks are swept into streams, then into the sea. There, the plastic is absorbed into the ecosystem, including into fish.
Currently, South Korea's Environment Ministry advises people to throw away masks as general waste in standard garbage bags, which are then either be buried or burned. Masks from hospitals are categorized as medical waste and are immediately sent for incineration. Experts say recycling is not recommended for masks given the mixed chemical substances and the possibility of virus transmission. At least 800 million face masks have been disposed of in South Korea since February after the introduction of the government's public rationing system. While the country comes up with a long-term solution to deal with the mask waste, experts are urging people to dispose of them properly to minimize environmental damage. 이경은 아리랑 뉴스.
That brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.